It's really nice to have a lectern that's short person friendly. I can actually stand here, it's really great. Now I'm laughing at myself because the top part of my note says hello. And it's probably something I should remember to say by myself, but you know. So my name's Jennifer. I'm a doctor and I specialise in psychiatry, and I founded CheckPoint, which is a non-profit organisation to connect mental health resources with video games and technology, which is why I'm here to talk to you today about a really important topic. And thank you so much to the organisers of Play by Play, Lucy, Navi, Rob, Pete, everybody, for accepting my pitch for this talk, because it's actually a really brave thing to do, to be the conference that's going to advocate for changing this kind of very entrenched culture of crunch. So that's what we're going to talk about. And that's me. And that's a big scary word right in the middle of the screen. So if I was going to do an elevator pitch on how not to manage a team, I would say, okay, get a bunch of people together, give them really unrealistic deadlines, withhold vital resources, force them to work excessive and antisocial hours with no respite. When they're done, offer them no support whatsoever, and then watch in surprise as everything falls apart. And yet this is something that continues to happen. We laughed, right? Because that sounds so ridiculous when I say it out loud like that. Like, it really does. But that's what happens. It's something that's been happening for a really, really long time. And I imagine that a whole bunch of you are sitting there thinking, look, we know it's rubbish. We go through it. We force it on ourselves at times. But that's just the way it is. So, like, well, who are you to stand there and tell us that we shouldn't be doing this anymore? And I understand. It's something that's systemic, it's infectious, it's intergenerational. It's really hard to combat because even though we've got evidence, the evidence is kind of counterintuitive. But I genuinely believe that if you repeat the same facts over and over and over again, eventually people will listen and things will change. And we've seen that throughout history. A really good example is smoking causes lung cancer. It took a long time and a lot of people getting sick before the media and the companies that are responsible for that happening, and therefore the public, ever really believed that smoking does cause lung cancer, because they had so many campaigns in their face going, it's safe, it's safe, it's safe, it's safe, until you couldn't ignore it anymore. And I genuinely believe that that's where we're going with crunch culture. So as I say, it's counterintuitive to think that crunch might not work, that if you force people to work really long hours, they won't give you as much work as if they were working less hours than that. That sounds really backwards. But there is really well-documented evidence. It's repeatable, it's reproducible, it's there for everybody to see. So let's stop believing these myths about crunch and let's start listening to the facts. Fact number 1, doesn't work. Crunch is genuinely correlated with lower success in the games that are released when they looked back at those teams and they found out who was doing mandatory crunches, and like it wasn't your choice to stay at work, you were forced to. You stay here and you do this work or you don't have a job anymore. Those games produce less profit and are more highly criticised. And this is something that was published on Gamma Sutra a few years ago, and it was this huge retrospective study, and all of the results are open access. Anybody can go and see this for themselves if they don't believe me. Fact number 2, crunch does work for 2 weeks, about. It actually improves productivity. People are, they're getting towards a real tangible deadline that's just in front of them. If I work really hard and get this done, there will be a product I can be proud of in 2 weeks' time, and then it will be over and I can have a little holiday. And that's why that sort of fact, that psychological process is why they're allowed to work, doctors, for example, very hard for a short period of time, because afterwards we get a break and that works. But if you're persistently crunching, it doesn't work anymore. In fact, after about 2 weeks, the productivity of the team falls below baseline. So they get less productive than if they had never been crunching at all, if it was just normal work hours. So you actually lose money by doing this. Why are we still doing it? It makes no sense. Fact number 3, crunch leads to burnout. And burnout is a real thing. It's a word that gets thrown around a lot. And my talker just before, Jeb, also mentioned crunch and burnout as a kind of a new hot topic in game development. And it is new, and it's something that's being explored more and more. Crunch does lead to burnout, which is a very extreme form of stress, and it's something I'll tell you a bit more about the physiological processes of in just a sec. But there's no real point of talking about what crunch does unless you talk about how you can combat it. I like how the laughs are like escalating as you realize like what's going on the screen here. So I really want to talk about, like, how does this happen in the first place, and then what can we do to intervene? Because we can't change crunch culture unless we understand what causes that sort of process in the first place. So this is a kind of a fun diagram based on something that a boss of mine once told me, which is the 6 Ps. Has anybody heard of this analogy before? Or not analogy, acronym? So it's proper preparation prevents piss poor performance. And I like to think of it in terms of static factors and dynamic factors, and that's a very medical way to put it. So you have risk factors for certain diseases, and they're either static, like your age, your gender, you can't change it, or they're dynamic, as in, like, do you smoke or do you eat McDonald's every weekend? Very guilty of that. And I see the same thing in game development. So on the left, I've got the logo for publisher, which is obviously supposed to symbolize, like, are you working to a deadline that somebody else has set, and are they changing the goalpost? There's not going to be much you can do about that unless you are like a PR whiz. And the bank, like, do you have a loan that you need to repay, or a grant whose timeline you need to adhere to? They're things that aren't going to be able to change, and so you just have to think, well, everything else that I can do something about, I will. And that's where the dynamic factors come in. And there's a whole bunch, and these are just a couple of ideas. So I put the bug in, because a very wise man once told me that however long you think something's going to take, give yourself twice as long to do it, because things happen that aren't supposed to happen, things go wrong. And it's not just in programming, it's in every aspect of development. Stuff will happen, no matter how well you plan for it. So plan for things that you didn't plan for. I know. And Tingle, from the Legend of Zelda series, which is that thing in the corner, he is an example to me of a feature that never needed to be there. No one ever wanted Tingle. He just showed up one day. And when you're at that stage where, like, look, we've got this hard deadline, the bank needs their money back, the publisher needs a release, and we've got this feature that we thought would be really cool, but actually it's using up a lot of different people's resources, their time and their energy and their motivation to be involved in this. And does it really need to be there? Could we take those resources and put it towards something that really does need to be there? And we were at GDC a couple of months ago, and I heard a very interesting talk about a game where the ending, or about the fact that sometimes the endings in games aren't as good as the beginning. And the guy was like, well, yeah, because 99% of the people that buy your game will see the beginning, but only like 30% of them will see the end. So you're investing in that early proportion. And that sucks, but that's time. That's how it works. You have to move resources to what's going to be the most beneficial and what's going to keep your team sane. So that's kind of a start, I think, from a non-developer about how to think about those things. And I would welcome people who our experienced developers to kind of help out with a model of how we can recommend doing this. Another way that you can address crunch culture in your studio is to change the ethics of your office. And this is something that is in all the talks I do, this slide. So if you have seen my talks before, I apologize, because you're going to hear 5 minutes of the same stuff again. But it's really, 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 really important. These are really easy things to integrate into a studio. Whether you're a small team or a big team, it doesn't really matter. These are things that you can do to prevent your team getting into a vicious cycle where the productivity drops to a point where their mental health is at risk. Have a curfew and stick to it. If you're someone that's in a position of management, or you're the boss, or even if just the others look up to you, I'm not working past 8 p.m. tonight. I'm just not. And actually do that. Make sure you go home. If your team want to go home and work in their own time, you can't stop that. But make a good example. Leave the office. Encourage autonomy and encourage creative pursuits. People are really productive if they're passionate about what they're doing. That was a lot of P's as well, wasn't it? People are really productive if they're passionate about what they're doing. And if you encourage them to have their own ideas and take things, your project in their own direction, then it makes them feel a lot more part of the team, and they're a lot more invested. That's called engagement, and it's actually the opposite of burnout. So engagement is the emotional investment that people have in the company and its goals, and you want that in your team. And making them feel like their ideas are valued, and that if they've got a creative pursuit that they want to follow, you're like, hey, you do that, and we'll see how it feeds back into the company. Team consistency and resources are also very similar with one another. So one of the biggest things that people not complain, but their feedback at the end of a project is, I just didn't have enough of what I needed to do this thing in the time frame they wanted me to do it. And sometimes it's just as simple as checking in with other members of the team and just being like, hey, do you have what you need? And is there anything else we could get you? Because it might not necessarily be something that requires a financial investment. It could just be, this extra program that you could get or whatever. And the more people feel like they're valued and they're getting the stuff that they need and they're being listened to at work, the more likely they are to stick around. And it's been shown time and time again that the more consistent your team is in the more people that are the same per project, the better the quality and the more productive they are, and the higher the profit that you get from that project. Because they know how to work with each other. It makes sense. They know how to work with each other, so they do things quicker, they feel more comfortable, they feel more confident, and they get the job done. But if there's new people coming in all the time, there's lots of interpersonal disruptions, it actually reduces profit. And so if the small investment now is into looking after your team and seeing how they are and checking in and making sure that they feel valued and listened to, for a long-term gain of having the same people around because they want to stick at your company because you're looking after them, it's actually worth it. Check in with your team. I always say this everywhere I go, that whenever I ask someone if they're okay, when you just kind of pass them on, you're okay? And they go, yeah, because it's super automatic. Ask it again a second time, because almost always the answer's different. I do this with my patients, I do this with my family, with my friends. The first time it will almost always be yes, because I think we're socially conditioned to do that. Are you okay? Yep, everything's good. Why would I show you my emotions? Whereas if you ask them a second time, they might be like, yeah, no, you know what? No, I am okay today. Thanks for asking, because I didn't, it clicks to them that you actually care. Or they might be like, look, to be honest, I'm not. And I don't really want to talk about it, but thanks for asking, or no, I'm not, and this is why. And if you are, feeling like you can hear that and receive that and support them, then you've just done a huge thing for this person's well-being and welfare at that stage. Validation's super important and feeds into having an open door policy. So if you're like the boss, let everybody else know that they can come to you, and you can't just do this just by saying, you can come to me, but then not practicing what you preach. So if someone comes to you and they're like, hey, I really need to chat, and you can't do it right then, I think there's a habit of being like, yeah, no, that's cool. I'll definitely talk to you, but then never getting around to it, and then the person doesn't want to come and ask again, and they feel really undervalued, or like you've forgotten, or that you never intended to go through with it. So one piece of advice I always give is set a time and a date. So if you are needing to talk to me, I can't do it right now, I'm really sorry, but I will be able to do it. Thank you. I will be able to do it at 2 p.m. after this meeting, or I will meet up with you just after work today, so that they know that there's an intention to follow through with that offer of being there, and then do it. And if you can't do it, give them another one and actually meet that one. And it just, that level of communication and that level of consistency between communication and the team is really important. And I think that all companies should have mental health procedures and a referral system. I've worked in a lot of different hospitals in many different countries, as you can tell. And I have learned every which way there is to operate a fire extinguisher. I have learned all of the manual handling safety procedures the world can produce, but no one has ever told me this is who you talk to if you feel like shit. And I'm a doctor. I think this should be mandatory, and if you want to introduce a mental health procedure or a mental health escalation plan, that doesn't even need to be like, hey, this is what you have to do. It could just be in the employment handbook that you give out, or it could just be on the wall somewhere. Come and talk to us. So CheckPoint are now a registered charity in New Zealand as well as Australia, and we are looking to get all of our activities going here as well, so we are available to help, and if that's something that you guys are interested in, please do get in contact, because we want to be as involved in this community as we are across the pond. Okay, so let's move on to burnout, which is very similar to crunch but is not the same, and is a real thing that is not just feeling rubbish or very tired or one of those pesky mental health problems that's not a real issue. And can't they just pull it together? I could go over there and try and point at what I'm about to say, but it's not going to work. So the thing about burnout is it's real. We've done numerous imaging studies, like functional fMRIs and SPECT studies, to look at what's going on in the brain for people who are and aren't experiencing burnout. And what they find is that there's actually a lower functional connectivity between the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex. So you can't see the amygdala in this diagram, but it's in the middle. You see the yellow bit that's like emotion and reading and interpretation? It's like right in there, right in the center of the brain. It's like, we kind of call it the lizard brain. It's what's responsible for those really instinctual emotions that just kind of come out of nowhere. And the way that connects to the frontal lobe, which is responsible for our conscious feelings and our conscious behavior, in between there's something called the prefrontal cortex, which is an inhibitory thing. And a good way to explain it is that when you get drunk, or when you are drinking alcohol, it dampens the prefrontal cortex, which is why your inhibition's lower. So you have a feeling, it tells your frontal cortex something, but that little barrier that goes, oh, would you do that? It ain't there no more. So I guess in that way, burnout's kind of like being drunk all the time, but without it being good in any way, shape, or form. So what the actual effect of that is that people can't regulate their emotions as well. So they'll have a feeling, and instead of having that conscious, like, I should put that in a box and wait till I get home to deal with that because that's not appropriate at work, or like even recognizing that they're having an emotion, their ability to do that is actually reduced, and that's not just in their head. Well, it is in their head, but it's not. It's not something they're choosing or controlling. It's something that is physiologically happening because of the effect that the burnout mechanism has on the brain. And in addition to that, it also impairs memory. So where memory is stored in that green area at the bottom, very close to the amygdala and the emotional center, it stops how you store your functional memory, which is like what's happening right now, which means that concentration becomes an issue. So an analogy I give is when you read a page, do you have to go back and read it again because you forgot what you were reading about halfway through? Reading one page of text is a really good kind of gauge of how your functional memory is going. And burnout affects that as well, so it becomes even harder to concentrate. And the beautiful thing about burnout is it's exponential. So when, when you are burned out, your brain has to move resources from one area to another to continue functioning in the way that you're trying to make it. In the same way that perhaps if you were about to run a marathon, you wouldn't just have an up and go that morning. You would have a proper breakfast with oats and things, because otherwise you're going to run out of energy halfway through. So that's what happens to the brain, except it's not got any more resources. You did have an up and go that morning. So instead of having the energy that it needs, having the resources that it needs to make those things work, it has to draw resources from other areas, which is usually the frontal cortex, because in your brain's opinion, that's the least important part. Because seeing is usually pretty important and remembering and stuff. So it ends up actually just in the vicious cycle of I feel terrible and I've got no energy and I can't think and I can't concentrate and now I'm really sad because I can't think and what's wrong with me? And it just gets worse and worse and worse until you have a break. And I think it's so important that we acknowledge the physiology of this. Even if I just said a whole bunch of words you didn't understand. I don't really understand them a lot of the time, it's fine. There's a picture of a brain up there and it's real. This is real stuff. It's not just something that people can control. And it has real impact. So on the left, I've kind of broadly described the symptoms. There are a lot more than these, which I'll go into just after, so you can have a bit of help recognizing them. But the impact that has all the way through the team is really substantial. So on the individual, if you notice that you're being more late, or you're not going into work, or a colleague isn't, there's more fights going on in the office, there's a possibility that somebody could be burned out. And of course, that person becomes less productive and less effective. And then what happens is there's this snowball effect on the rest of the team. So as you all know, a team is a cohesive unit where everybody relies on everybody else. And if someone isn't pulling their weight, that means that the others are going to have to step in and do their job for them, or contribute in a way that they weren't anticipating for, that wasn't planned for, which means that they're now doing more than they expected to do, more than they have the capacity to do, which means that they're going to get burned out. And you see where I'm going with this? If one person makes 3 other people burned out, and those 3 people make 3 people each burned out, then very quickly you've got an organization that isn't working anymore. And for the company, what that looks like is decreased performance, lack of job satisfaction, and higher employee turnover. So that team consistency, the one that's so important for making people's job easy and having high productivity and good profits, that goes away as soon as that kind of burnout snowball starts to roll. And while those 3 things, the depersonalization, the reduced emotional regulation, are very important, there's a whole bunch of ways that this can present, and we call them kind of vague, non-specific symptoms in medicine. When when you go to your doctor and you're like, oh, this is kind of happening, but sometimes it doesn't, and then this feeling comes, and they're like, it could be a lot of things. That means, don't know. So burnout's one of the things that presents like that. And any one of these things could mean that you're burned out, or it could mean something else. It's important to just kind of keep everything in context, and obviously the disclaimer is that if you are feeling any of these symptoms and it's affecting your life, please go and see your medical professional or mental health professional. It's super important. And And even if they say, I don't know, they do care, and they will follow up on it. They just don't know at that point yet. So burnout often presents with exhaustion and insomnia, not one and the same. Insomnia does make you exhausted, but some people can sleep for 12, 14, 16 hours and still feel like they've got no energy at all. They can feel like they can't concentrate and they're forgetting stuff really easily, which is what I talked about before, the functional memory aspect. People can get sick more often than they were before, which is a physiological response to stress. So when you're very stressed out for a prolonged period of time, you have an increased level of cortisol and other catecholamines in the bloodstream, which reduces your ability to fight infection. So people just get like heaps of colds and flus, and they're just like just sick all the time, and I don't know why. It's probably because your body's under chronic stress. Or unexplained other physical symptoms like funny tummy or persistent headaches, and gynecological issues in the ladies. You know, you can even, your periods can even stop, or you can get them more regularly, which again, it feels like, well, no, that's like a real biological thing, but actually it can be related to stress and burnout. And that includes feeling less hungry and losing weight because you're not eating as much, actually getting clinical anxiety and clinical depression, which a lot of these symptoms are kind of diagnostic of anxiety and depression, like not really having enjoyment in things that you used to enjoy. We call that anhedonia. Pessimism and just being like, well, is this just not going to get better? And that attitude is super toxic for the workplace because it's really infectious. And the person can become quite isolated and not really want to talk to other people. They don't really want to like burden them, but at the same time they might not have the energy to talk to other people. They might feel very apathetic, like just don't care. And depersonalization is a very interesting medical term for a phenomenon that's hard to describe, but it's feeling detached, feeling like this isn't real or it's not happening, or like people describe feeling like they're just walking in a daydream, or they're dead inside, and it's just like complete separation from reality. And of course, lack of productivity and poor performance is really, really entrenched in all that. So that was terrifying for everybody. Sorry. So what can you do? And I've separated this. What really annoyed me about this, sorry, this is like a complete tangent. I Googled icon for boss. Guess what gender all the icons were? They were all men, so you've got a little man boss there and a kind of, you know, gender-neutral team. If you're a member of the team, you can check in with yourself. Joe was saying this just before, just kind of creating a thought diary or a mood diary is a really great way of doing this, and just kind of tracking it over time, because the interesting thing about burnout is the more burned out you get, the less you realize you're burned out. So you just keep going with the resources that you have left, and you forget to think, oh, is this normal? Because you're just going. So check in with yourself and see how you are, and check in with each other, and try and raise awareness for these issues. I did a talk at GDC, which is available in the Vault, which touches on a lot of this. And it's really easy to just be like, hey, check out this video that this chick did one time, because someone might watch it and be like, well, that's complete bollocks. Or they might watch it and be like, oh, all of this stuff happened that I didn't even realize was going on, and that was really useful. Practice self-care. Super important, and I wish I could talk to you for an hour about self-care. Maybe one day I will. And try to get some exercise. It's really hard for game dev, as I'm finding out now that I work from home. Not that I'm a game dev, but I do this from home now. That it's so easy to just sit at a desk all day and forget to go out and do anything, but actually it's super healthy and really, really productive to do that. And if you're the boss or the team leader, you can make sure that you're monitoring your team's burnout levels and checking in with them, asking how they're feeling, and knowing what burnout looks like. You can actually do something about it. You can intervene early and take responsibility for that, because if your team is burned out, someone needs to have accountability, and it shouldn't be them. It should be the person in charge. It should be the person who's managing that situation, because it's them providing the resources. It's them that's leading the culture. Work ethic is top down, and someone needs to acknowledge the importance of these things, and it's best if it comes from the top. So hopefully that's given you some cool stuff to think about. If you have any questions, I'll be around after and also tonight at the awards, and you can check out CheckPoint, and the logo's there twice, soz. And I didn't put my thing on here, but I'm RX_Pixel on Twitter, and I am quite responsive to tweets and things. Check out what we're doing online. I've got like half a minute to do some promotion. We're running a Kickstarter campaign from the 1st of May. We're hoping to produce a web series to connect mental health resources with the gaming community, so educating about mental health, but also a specific part of that will be mental health for game dev. And if you kind of follow us and keep up to date, we'll let you know about that, and that's in a week's time, and we're going to need all the help we can get. So if this is something that's been interesting and useful for you, please stay in touch and please help us out. Thank you very much.